What's up, everybody? I'm Phil Perry. Welcome into the Next Pats podcast. It is Combine Week. I know you're as excited as I am. We're going to give you a little Combine primer here on Next Pats today. We'll be coming at you with plenty more content from the Combine itself. I'll be in Indy. John the Skull Crusher Henry will be in Indy. Players will be in Indy. We'll be talking to them. We'll be talking to other media folks in Indy who have been studying this draft class for, let's be honest, months longer than yours truly. So we're going to get all kinds of intel, all kinds of good information from Indianapolis at the Combine. Very excited to get there. But before we get there, again, I want to give you a little primer. And this is something that I wrote about for NBCSportsBoston.com. So if you haven't seen the story already, please go check it out. But I had a chance to talk to a few people across the league to get an idea of some of the players that we should be looking at in Indianapolis as top performers, who we expect to be the guys, the workout warriors, the guys who really help themselves when they get to Indianapolis and they blow up the workout portion, right? We know that's not the be all end all. It's not the most important thing, far from it when it comes to draft evaluation, but it does help. Okay. And so the positions that I was focused on are positions that we perceive as Patriots needs right now, knowing those might change. Right? Those might change by the time we get through free agency. Are the Patriots able to keep J.C. Jackson? Are they able to potentially add a wide receiver? Are they able to keep a tackle, keep a left guard, sign a new tackle, sign a new left guard? What are they doing at linebacker? Okay, so there are a lot of question marks. Some of those will be answered in free agency. But as far as the draft goes, the positions that I'm most interested in: wide receiver, corner, linebacker, tackle. You want some top performers that I'm expecting to be showing their stuff in Indy? Let's get to it. Wide receiver first. One guy who really, I think, has the potential to really help himself is somebody who's been mocked in the mid to late first round range. And maybe he still ends up there, but I think you could see him creep up some mock drafts by the time the Combine is done. It's Chris Olave, one of the biggest name receivers in this year's draft class. Chris Olave from Ohio State, true burner. Maybe the best route runner in this year's draft. Slight, okay? So to me, somebody who is going to be more along the lines of a Brandon Cooks type rather than an A.J. Brown type, okay? Just the size and the frame alone combined with the speed, the ability to run routes. I'm not saying he is Brandon Cooks, but just to give you just a very quick and easy, quick and dirty comp. Not a whole lot of thought put into that one. So we'll come up with something a little bit more definitive as we get deeper into this offseason, but he's going to burn up the Combine. He's going to kill it in the 40, and you're going to see his stock rise. A smaller name and a smaller human, Calvin Austin out of Memphis. This guy can cook. Might end up running in the 4.3s, real track speed. Undersized, though. And so he's going to be one of those vertical slot threats that we've talked about over the years. So whether you're talking about Tyler Lockett, Dwayne Eskridge, okay, somebody that we had on the podcast last year, undersized, use him in the slot, but he can get down the field. That's Calvin Austin out of Memphis. So keep an eye on him. I know a lot of people are looking for the Patriots to get a slot receiver this offseason somehow. He's not your traditional Patriots slot. So somebody you're going to use on end arounds, somebody to stretch the field vertically as well as horizontally. Very diminutive in terms of his frame, but big time speed. Okay. So there's your two receivers. Let's flip it over to corner now. I mean, a couple of the biggest name corners are also going to be guys who impress and might still work their way up the draft board. You know, maybe they are fringe top 10 picks right now. Maybe they start to get more solidly into not just the top 10 range, but maybe you're talking about potential top 5 guys at this cornerback spot, depending on how well they run. One name is Sauce Gardner, Cincinnati, 6'2", about 200 pounds, long, lanky, but really athletic. Able to make plays on the football. Just one of the toughest corners in college football when it comes to receiver production allowed. And then Kyler Gordon is the other name. Now, this is a name that might be a little bit more realistic for the Patriots to land. More realistic for him to sneak down into that 20-ish range. Really good athlete. I think he's going to test well across the board. And I think he's a Patriots fit. He is a willing tackler, which we know matters for Bill Belichick. He's scheme versatile, so he can play man. He can play zone. Is he going to excel? Is he going to be dominant in one or the other? I don't think so, not yet, at least. So are you drafting him to be your number one in year one? That might be asking a lot if the Patriots end up moving on from J.C. Jackson, but I think he has loads of potential because of the athleticism and that versatility, that willingness to tackle. I'm sure Bill Belichick would try to work him in on special teams as well. The kind of athlete he is, he does look like a Patriots fit to me. I could easily envision him making our prototypical Patriots list later this offseason. Let's kick it over to linebackers now. I know a lot of people love themselves some Nakobe Dean out of Georgia. I think his stock is going to drop a little bit this week. It doesn't mean he's a bad player. He's a great player, and he plays fast. I just don't think he's going to test all that well, from what I understand. And he might measure in sub 6 feet. So he's going to be about 6 feet, 225 pounds. He's not going to run real fast. It's going to be difficult to argue for him as a top half of the first round kind of player, in my opinion, after the combine. But I think the Georgia linebacker the Patriots fans will be higher on after the combine will be Quay Walker. So Quay Walker is going to be about 6'4", 240 pounds. So much bigger, much more in that traditional Patriots off-the-ball linebacker mold. Big-bodied guy that can take on offensive linemen one-on-one, at least in theory, and use his athleticism when he needs to. And he's an athlete. He might run in the low 4.6s. So he's somebody who I could really see rising up boards as the process goes on, and especially right after the combine when these test numbers are fresh, because I think he's going to test really, really well. And to me, he is one of the better Patriots fits at off-the-ball linebacker. We talked about Darian Beavers from Cincinnati, Leo Chenal from Wisconsin. These are big-bodied, off-the-ball Patriots types at linebacker. You don't necessarily need two of those guys. They had two last year, Juwan Bentley and Dante Hightower. They've had two in the past. Dante Hightower and Jamie Collins, 250-pound guys. I think they'd be willing to sneak a 230-ish pound guy in there if he can play the way they want him to play and if there's a big body player next to him. I think you need at least one of those in this Patriot system. But say Devin Lloyd from Utah. If he's 230, 235, and he's next to Dante Hightower, or he's next to another big body linebacker, I think that's something the Patriots could get by with. Because that other player, that if it's Devin Lloyd, if it's Nakobe Dean, would bring so much in terms of quickness, athleticism, the ability to run and chase. Maybe let the bigger player, the Hightower type of player, do the dirty work in terms of taking on those blocks. You let the other guy clean things up. That's sort of how I would envision this, right? Landon Roberts was a player who played a lot of football for the Patriots. He was a late round pick, but that's somebody who's 6 feet, about 230 pounds. So they have gotten by with smaller players before. You just have to be willing to play a certain style. And I think you do need that big body next to you. So with Dante Hightower no longer under contract, Juwan Bentley set to hit free agency as well. There's some questions there. They need one big guy off the ball. Does it have to come in the draft? Not necessarily. And if you get that guy in free agency, maybe it frees you up to get that smaller guy in the spring. Okay, last position here. Who can really help themselves at tackle? And the name that stood out to me was Trevor Penning. Now, this is somebody who's already mocked as a first-round pick in a lot of places, somebody who had a little bit of an up-and-down Senior Bowl, but had some real highlight blocks at the Senior Bowl, was just mean, nasty, throwing guys to the ground, pissing off some of his opponents, quite frankly, after the whistle. You like to see that, though, in your offensive lineman. But he's not just that. He's not just that pest in the trenches. This guy is I can windmill dunk it if you ask me to, if we find a gym somewhere type of offensive tackle. He's going to really light it up. The vertical, the broad, I think some of the shuttle drills as well. I don't know what's in the water in Northern Iowa, but last year it was Spencer Brown. This year it's Trevor Penning, both great athletes. Spencer Brown ended up starting at tackle for the Bills last year. Freaky athlete. I think Penning's going to go higher than Brown did. And what he does at the combine should only solidify that, if not work him even further up the board. Daniel Jeremiah had him as a top 10 pick in his most recent mock draft. So that just gives you a little bit of an indication of where some of these scouts and where the league might already be on Trevor Penning. If he lights it up in Indy, he's only going to help himself. All right, let's get some more combine insight now from the one, the only, Daniel Jeremiah. He did his annual pre-combine media conference call last week. We were able to ask him a few questions. I wanted to know, in particular, how he felt about the receiver class and which receiver near the top of the class has the explosive ability that the Patriots need to be able to diversify their offense. So we're going to hear from Daniel Jeremiah. We're going to come back. And then on the back end, we've got more NFL media goodness for you. It's Rhett Lewis, former Channel 7 superstar. You watched him when he was here in Boston. He understands what the Patriots want. He understands what the Patriots need. He spent some time with us when we were out in LA before the Super Bowl to tell us all about the Shrine Bowl. He was just coming off the Shrine Bowl. And I said, hey, great opportunity for us to know a little bit more about some of these prospects that we might not otherwise dig into. So he was phenomenal in terms of just giving us guys, whether it was at the receiver spot, the gadget type receiver, the traditional slot receiver. He names a Lenore Ryan player for us. Kyle Duggar's alma mater, another freaky athlete set to come into the draft out of Lenore Ryan this offseason. We even get into some defensive tackle prospects. I think there could be some movement on that part of the Patriots roster this offseason. So great stuff from Rhett Lewis. But first, let's get to Daniel Jeremiah.
Thank you guys for joining us again this year. It seems like it definitely snuck up on us with the kind of condensed schedule after the Super Bowl, but it definitely excited to get all the draft conversation kicked up and cranking. This is it's a fun draft class. I think it's different than some of the years we've had recently where from a quarterback standpoint, I don't know that we have the star power. I don't know that we'll have a top 10 pick there. So I think a lot of people have kind of looked at the top of this draft and have their thoughts about whether or not it stacks up with previous years. But I would just say, kind of as I'm going through this process and watching all these guys and then paying attention through the postseason and seeing the Rams win the Super Bowl, I think the discussion about the Rams being a superstar team is obviously very valid. But I think if you look at that team and who some of their key players are and the home run picks they've had outside the first round, to help really build the nucleus of that team, it shows you the importance of depth in a draft. And I think this is a really good depth draft, especially when you get into the second, third, fourth round. There's a lot of quality there, a lot of starters. So really looking forward to the Combine in Indianapolis, watching these guys all work out, and looking forward to chatting with you guys. So fire away.
Yeah, just want to get your assessment of the top Georgia guys that we're seeing in a lot of first rounds. Dean, Jordan Davis, Trayvon Walker, and Monte Wyatt.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them, man.
Defenders.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them. I just I have everything kind of set up to give you a peek behind the curtain. Everything's set up in my Excel sheet. When I get to Georgia, I have to like really scroll to get to all my notes because there's so many of those guys. But I'll go through them here one by one. Nakobe Dean, I remember Vilma when he first came into the league, and I remember, during the scouting process and some of the people had concerns about size or this, that, or the other. And the guy was just dripping with instincts. Everything was so natural to him. He saw things and was 2 steps ahead of everybody on the field. That's who Nakobe Dean reminds me of. When you talk about the center of your defense and having that intelligence, the toughness, the leadership, he's got all that stuff in spades. So I think he's outstanding. He can cover. You see him mirror backs. He's a real crafty blitzer. When my notes, I just said, this guy does everything fast. Like there's nothing he does that isn't fast. And so, he's probably the greatest disparity in terms of how I have a guy graded and where I have him going, because I can't get a feel for where he's going to go in the first round. He's a top 10 player for me, but I know in talking to a lot of teams are obsessed with trying to find the longer, rangier off the ball linebackers. They're looking for Darius Leonard. They're looking for Fred Warner. And I think some of that kind of dings Nakobe because he doesn't have that size and length. So I'm curious to see where he goes, but I'll bet on him. I think he's going to be a really, really good player. Trayvon Walker is one that I think I upset the majority of the New York Giant fan base by giving him to the Giants in this latest mock draft. And I wasn't trolling. I legit think this dude's got a chance to go all the way up there. He's going to go to the combine. And from what I was told from what he was doing at Georgia, he's going to be 6'5", anywhere from 265 to 275 pounds. He's probably going to have close to 35-inch arms, which is ridiculously long. And he's going to run in the low 4.6s. So he literally he's a special athlete. And when you watch him on tape at Georgia, I know some people will point to the pressure percentage numbers, or, the pass production and be a little disappointed. But when you study him and you see how tight his alignments are there and what he's asked to do, they don't loosen him up on the edge and just let him go. Like I think an NFL team is going to give him that opportunity. And I think you're going to see a really, really good player. But this is somebody, when you're talking to GMs and personnel directors, on an almost daily basis, this guy's name comes up every day. Like this guy's got a lot of love around the league, and he's going to go a lot higher than people anticipate. So I'm a fan of his game. Bonus on him. If you want to see one of the better plays in this draft, go watch what he does against Florida when he drops in coverage and tips a ball up in the air that gets picked off. It's pretty incredible. Jordan Davis is, I would say, a pretty polarizing player from folks around the league. Obviously, he's a giant. He's enormous. He's really got some knockback to him as a pass rusher. He's got some sneaky quickness to go along with that. He's got range against the run. The big question on him was, how much can you play him, and how big is his gas tank? In that first Alabama game, that bothered some folks because you thought he got really gassed out. They went with a little tempo, kept him on the field, and gassed him out. But I think he goes somewhere in the 10 to 20 range in this draft, just because he's such a unique player because of the size. He's an interesting one. I'll go to the next one in Devontae Wyatt. He's going to put on a show at the combine as well. I mean, he's a freak. He was dominant at the Senior Bowl, super twitched up. So he's going to be 300 plus pounds. He's going to run in probably like the 4.8s or something like that. He's going to go flying up the board because everybody's trying to find interior pass rushers. Quay Walker can play off the ball. He can play over the tight end. Real physical. He's got tremendous range. I think he probably goes in the second round, would be my guess in this draft. And then Seen is just a real physical safety. He's a great run support player. Plays with a lot of speed. I think his thing is going to be in coverage. You can see him in coverage. There's sometimes he gets beat by tight ends, and that's a little bit of the concern there. But you love the temperament and how he plays.
Thank you.
I was wondering if you could speak to the effect that 2021 is going to have on 2022. And I know last year we spoke about how there was, about a third as many prospects in the pool. So the pool of candidates for the draft was shallow. This year, are we seeing what we expected, that there's going to be value in round 6 and 7? And also, if you could kind of speak to kind of the return of the cluster busting or the group think with the return of the combine. And so how is that going to all kind of affect this year's draft?
Yeah, I mean, the last year was definitely unique, not having the combine. And I think when you look at what we anticipated last year, it's kind of interesting because, yes, we do have, I think it's going to be a good day 3 when you get into round 6 and 7. I think there is some good depth there. I don't think it's quite what everybody expected, though. And I think part of that has to do with the extra year that all these guys still have that wanted to go back. I think we saw a decent number of guys do that. And talking to college coaches around the country, I know there's some frustration with trying to get your arms around the NIL stuff. But one of the things it's done is I think it's allowed them to keep some players that maybe would have come out in other years. So I think maybe the huge wave of numbers we thought we'd see this year, I don't know that it's necessarily there for those reasons. The combine being back, though, yeah, it's back, but I don't know that every organization is sending their full allotment of people like they normally would. I know, some people are coming in for a little bit and then leaving. So, some of the groupthink stuff that would go on in years past, I don't know if we'll have that to that full extent, but there are a lot of clusters. When you talk about, cluster busters in this draft and closely graded players, I mean, I've said similar things in years past, but this year especially, like the difference between the 15th player and the 60th player in this draft is very small. And teams are going to have these guys in all different orders. So it's going to be fascinating to see how it all comes together.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yep.
Next question comes from Phil Perry. Phil, you may ask your question.
Daniel, how's it going, man? Hopefully you're managing your Padres withdrawal. Okay.
No, hey, we do great in the shortened season, man. Like I'm the only person in the world that's okay with this lockout right now.
This is an optimist. This is a good thing. This is a good thing for your guys.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Hey, well, thank you for doing this. And I wanted to ask you about the Patriots and maybe the potential for them to upgrade their receiver room. We talked during the season and you called Mac Jones a trailer with truck upside. Okay. So are there any guys in that 20 to 50 range? They're picking at 21 and 53 that could come in right away and help Mac Jones get a little bit closer to that truck upside.
Yeah, I think there's a ton of guys in that range. The two guys I would keep an eye on with that first round pick, who I think are going to probably come off the board or right around there. Now, I say that going into the combine, knowing that I'm talking about Chris Olave from Ohio State and Jahan Dotson from Penn State. Both these guys are going to run the 4.3s. So they're going to fly in Indy, and maybe that helps elevate them up the board a little bit. But both those guys are pristine route runners with big time speed. And I think that would give them some playmaking ability. Think about Mac and the deep ball that he was able to throw in college. He throws a beautiful touch deep ball. When you got guys that can get over the top, takeoffs, posts, double moves, things like that, that's what Olave and Jahan Dotson can do. And I think Dotson, for me, I think he has the best hands in the draft. Like, he really attacks the football. He's got outstanding ability to adjust. He can catch it, back hip, above the rim, you name it, he can do it. So he's a really intriguing player to me. Both these guys, I think the reason why they would be there in the 20s is because of the play strength question. Both of them are going to be under 190 pounds. And you just wish they were a little bit physically stronger. But I think both of them, they come off the board in that range. And then there's, the other one in the first round. We'll see what happens with Jameson Williams from Alabama, because in a world where he doesn't get hurt, he's a top 10 pick. But coming off of an ACL, you'd think there'll be a full recovery there. And that could end up being end up being a tremendous value for somebody towards the bottom of the first round if he ends up sliding down there. A couple other guys that I think are kind of like Patriot type players. Sky Moore from Western Michigan, probably going to go in the second or third round, but he's got some, maybe it's just the Mac thing, but I saw some Antonio Brown traits from him when you studied him, minus some of the newer Antonio Brown info. But that dude can just eat cushion. He's really dynamic and crisp. The Patriots love guys like that. He's quicker than a hiccup, just puts guys in a blender. He's fun to watch. And then another one I would say for an outside guy that's really starting to get some steam is Christian Watson from North Dakota State, who's 6'4", 211 pounds, had an awesome week down there at the Senior Bowl, and he's going to run really fast as well. And it's actually was a more fluid and smooth route runner down in Mobile than maybe you anticipated off of the tape. So it's a great wide receiver draft. I mean, I feel like we could probably just, cut and paste the comments on wide receivers and use it for the next 20 years, because the college game has given us a ton of these guys every year.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, DJ. Appreciate it. All right. Great stuff there from DJ. As always, can't wait to hear his takeaways from this year's combine, but let's get right into our conversation now with Rhett Lewis, Shrine Bowl aficionado. You're going to have a chance to learn about some guys you have never heard about before. Enjoy. Here's Rhett. So let's just get right into it.
Okay.
Tell me what happened at the Shrine Bowl. No, you got to call the game with Bucky Brooks, and you were there all week.
Yeah.
You did a great job.
A little long to be in Vegas. 5 days.
But you had fun.
Yes, we had fun. What I'm realizing now, Phil, is that though this is a shell game for you to try to get me to talk about the athleticism of people with the last name Perry, like Brown quarterback E.J. Perry, who was the offensive MVP of the game.
Who might be my cousin, not sure yet, but we will work to confirm. All right, so E.J. Perry.
E.J. Perry.
He stood out to you.
He is a name to know for this game. So this is, he is in rarefied air. He might have had the best all-star game stat line for a quarterback in All-Star game history. Let that sink in for a second. This is a Perry now.
This is a big day for the Perrys.
It's a big day.
Because I didn't realize that.
Tyler's here somewhere. I don't know if you saw that, but
Joe? Is Joe around?
In terms of EJ, second half he comes on, which was a shocker to me because all the coaches talked about him being the best quarterback on their team. Who was coached by Danton Lynn of the Baltimore Ravens. And so they were like, he's been fantastic. He's going to be our starter. Turns out they meant starter the second half.
Okay.
So they built themselves a huge hole. Dustin Crum from Kent State had some struggles, and so they were down like 20 points entering into the third quarter. Perry comes in, throws 3 touchdown passes in the second half, 250 yards, ran for a couple 2-point conversions, and and nearly led the comeback, was the offensive MVP of the game on the losing team.
It's impressive, but you know what? I think people will only learn to hate Ivy League people more after hearing all this, because it sounds like, what more can the guy do? Okay, people at home are listening and they're saying, okay, this is a Patriots-themed podcast. What the hell are we talking about quarterbacks for? But he probably projects as somebody who's going to be a second, third type string guy, potentially?
Yes.
So the Patriots could be looking for a developmental guy to add to the mix. Who knows if that's Jarrett Stidham? Who knows if Brian Hoyer is back? He can't be around forever. And Brian Hoyer, all the credit in the world for being a smart guy. Sounds like they have another opportunity to bring another spark.
He's the Ivy League Player of the Year. So know that name. EJ Perry is fantastic. And then the player of the entire week, unfortunately, didn't play in the game. I think he was a little sore from wearing out the DBs all week, and that was wide receiver from UCLA, Kyle Phillips, who, if there are, in fact, people from New England listening to whatever it is we're doing right now, Phil.
A couple. Perry's mostly.
Yeah, mostly your family. Great. They will recognize Kyle Phillips as a Julian Edelman type, as a Wes Welker type, more contemporary, as a Hunter Renfrow type. And that's not just because of appearance, that's because of quickness. That's because of his ability to kind of manipulate defensive backs from the slot, option routes. He absolutely crushed people all week long. And I guess it really shouldn't come as no surprise. Like he's not a under the radar type of. He was a 4-star recruit, goes to UCLA, leads them in receiving for the last 3 years, but it wasn't necessarily in the framework of the national conversation. He is now, and he's going to be a day 2 pick.
I'm glad you brought up that name because we already mentioned him.
Did you?
When we first landed here in Hollywood, Rhett.
Yeah.
I had the opportunity to put together the perfect Patriots offseason script, to prepare them for 2022. And one of the things that I think they need to do to help Mac Jones get to another level is add a true slot. I love Jacoby Myers. I think he's a productive receiver in the league, and he has a spot on this team, regardless of where 100%. They use him. But they don't have that Edelman, Welker, Amendola type, and I think it would help a young quarterback, and Phillips is a guy that we've brought up.
Absolutely.
Chip Kelly connection. You could see him working in New England. You have covered the Patriots. For the people listening at home that don't remember, Rhett Lewis is a Boston guy. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if he considers himself that way, but you live there. You covered this team. You are. There's some Boston there in you. Yes. Yeah. West End stand up. There's like a half dozen people that are like, is this what the West End? I guess that's me.
Next name GH. That's the West End. Okay. But yeah, but there are other guys like that on this roster. I'm going to have a chance here in just a little bit to talk to Deebo Samuel, and everyone's on the hunt now for the next Deebo Samuel, right? The guy who can, run and has that versatility. You can hand it off to him, you can throw it to him. He makes plays regardless with the ball in his hands, right? There's a kid like that because I know you love the kind of the under the radar stories. Derek Young from Lenore-Rhine.
Get out of here. We know Lenore-Rhine.
Lenore-Rhine, Division II, North Carolina. Kyle Duggar, second-round pick. This will not be a second-round pick, like Deebo was and like Kyle Duggar was. This kid, though, Marcus Brady, who was the offensive coordinator for the Colts, was the head coach of this game. And I brought Derek Young up, and he was like, Deebo Samuel? And I was like, yes. And I was like, he was like, well, if we can motion shift, use, kind of some of that pre-snap eye candy, that dude would be the guy, right? He's a big, strong dude. He actually, his first 2 years, you can fact check this with Duggar, his first 2 years at Lenore-Rhine, they ran the wing T. I ran the wing tee in 1997.
You're old.
High school.
You're old.
Because that was, we had 22 kids on our team, okay? And so he was the wide receiver or the wing back. And so, he's blocked. He ran for 500 yards his first 2 years. He's got some of that. It's maybe like a poor man's Debo, but he's got the framework for it, which is kind of, one of those interesting names to know.
And you're telling me Bill Belichick wouldn't love to add somebody who played in a wing tee offense? Says, hey, line up right here. We're going to have you
a defensive back that
you're just rolling now. I love this.
Yeah,
you give it. This is like a good jazz performance here. I love it. No, give me this shrine. Give me the shrine stuff. You don't have to work today, right?
Yeah, a little bit. But this is going to be good because I know your pal DJ Bean has studied this a little bit too. Giardi has, and all of our Boston friends. But a DB that should probably go in the 7th round that Bill will take in the 2nd round.
That happens. Tends to happen.
Yeah, that has happened before. Guy named Wanye Thomas from Georgia Tech. He may go higher than the 7th round, especially after his week at the Shrine Bowl. If you're into sure tacklers, if the guy gets his hand on you, you are going down type of players, he's a safety from Georgia Tech. He made a couple of plays on a goal line stand in the first quarter that, I looked at Bucky, he looked at me, and we were like, mm-hmm. Yep, that's him. No, so Wanye Thomas from Georgia Tech, another name to know is a safety.
Tackling's the name of the game for Bill Belichick. He loves his defensive backs who can tackle. He's called Patrick Chung one of the best tacklers he's ever coached. He's coached pretty good tacklers in the day. Devin McCourty's been in that conversation as well. I want to ask you about some big boys. Because when I looked at the Shrine Bowl rosters, and I'm just looking at heights and weights, they had some massive individuals down there.
Olaseni? Yes.
Run that one back one more time for us.
Bam Olaseni from Utah, 1-year starter, came from London, listened to my pal Daniel Jeremiah, Bucky, and myself on the Move the Sticks podcast to learn what football was. He comes from London where football is, decidedly something different, American football. So then he was listening to the podcast, he was playing Madden, he then Googled American football in London and went and joined up on I guess they have ragtag outfits out there that go and play American football outside of the school structure for older humans, which we don't really do that here.
No, not really.
Yeah. So anyway, so he did that. He got he ended up at a junior college in Kansas, I believe, Garden City Community College. Played 2 years, got a scholarship to Utah. He's got an 88-inch wingspan. That's from here to McAfee over there at FanDuel, okay? It's insane.
I wish the people could see your face as you're saying that. I mean, the eyelids might as well have been peeled back to the back of your skull.
Camera. I put makeup on and everything. I got to go wipe this off. This is really awkward for me, but
you look great.
Thank you.
You do look great.
So do you.
You know what happened was? You'll appreciate this. Yeah. All our cameras are at Julian Edelman's house because they found out that Julian Edelman was ready to welcome people in today, sort of on late notice. So you've got stuck with me.
In Los Angeles?
Yes. Malibu, I believe, is where he's at.
He's my neighbor.
Is he?
Yeah.
Have you seen him tooling around?
We're in the vicinity.
I'm not sure of that, but everyone said, "Okay, we're gonna go talk to Julian. You can go talk to Rhett." Tom Curran wrote a book on Julian Edelman, so that probably gets you an in. And now we've got a few other cameras and all sorts of people over there. But you got me, and that's fun, right?
Yeah.
No, I think it comes across to everybody at home.
Paris. This is great for you, though, because the weather here in Los Angeles has allowed you to bring all of your Nantucket gear right here in Los Angeles, and you're just
feel right at home. I've actually never been to Nantucket, but now I can feel like what? A guy wears a pink button-down shirt and some boat shoes, and all of a sudden he's got a residence in Nantucket. That's not the case.
Yeah, come on. I never went to Pagawi. I missed it. But yeah, man, the Shrine Bowl was great, and I got to go down to the Senior Bowl too. And so once we wrap up this other game happening on Sunday, then we can really start looking at the draft.
I love it. You guys do great work at Move the Sticks. I did not realize you were also at the Senior Bowl. That's a lot of travel for my guy, because you were Vegas to Mobile, now back.
Not my biggest fan right now, and I have not been home in about 12 days, and still got a few days to go here this week. So yeah, it All-Star game season, and then Super Bowl, and then soon enough we're going to be in the Combine. It's just a great time to be alive.
It's a great time. It's a great time. Can you give us one name that, for knowing the Patriots the way you know them?
Yep.
Is there one Senior Bowl player that we
Diego
should be?
Fagot, Navy linebacker. I mean, do I need to say anything more?
Defensive MVP of the game, right?
Correct. I've now given you both of the MVPs of the game. Diego Fagot, he's one of those dudes that looks you in the eye, no matter who you are when you talk to him. Did not want to go to Navy. Ended up having his scholarship pulled like the day before he was supposed to go on an official visit to Illinois. Scott Frost left UCF, so he didn't want to take the scholarship offer. He had huge Power 5 offers, and then just ended up taking a visit to Annapolis and loved it. Ended up going, but I mean, he's like, the first thing they tell you when you go play football in Navy is like, we make officers here, not football players. And so he essentially had to overcome that in a way to where now it's actually kind of beneficial for him, because everyone's like, all right, this dude now can focus on football and not, everything else that goes along with being at a military academy. And so like his like potential, we may only be like scratching the surface in terms of, football acumen, in terms of, technique and fundamentals and the whole thing. I think he's going to be a really productive player in the league, probably early on special teams. And him and Joe Cardona can put each other in headlocks in the locker room. So
sing the fight song, bash on Army. It'll be a blast in that locker room for the New England Patriots, and maybe gives them a little bit of speed at the linebacker level, which is what everybody's talking about this offseason.
He is an old school thumper. Like that's what the coaches told us, and we saw it in the game. They're like, he's the biggest hitter all week, and he had the biggest hit in the game. So it's fun to see like the practice stuff that people talk to you about actually show up when the red lights come on, and that's what we saw. So it's really good. Although also Jack Cohn was supremely impressive. Like as a guy who has Power 5 experience at 2 different schools, depending on what you think of Notre Dame.
Wow.
Well, I mean,
shots fired.
Indiana,
I know. Indiana. Okay.
And so like he's a dude that knows NFL type like offensive system, scheme and philosophy, and that show. I mean, he went like 9 for 9 to start the game. So you're like, okay, this dude is clearly like the above the rest of the class. So that could be another, like, if Ian Book went in the 4th round to the New Orleans Saints, I prefer Jack Cohn as a player.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I could see him going a little bit before that.
You know who else shows up when the red light comes on? Rhett Lewis. That guy right there. There is no red light, unfortunately, for him. He thought there might be.
I really did.
Instead, he just got to catch up with his old buddy Phil.
Way better in catching up with Curran, though, so.
Well, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I mean, could you imagine if it had been Curran here and I'm at Julian Edelman's house hanging out? No.
I wouldn't have showed up.
Well, because you might have been injured, I feel like, too. Like, that would not have gone over well at all. Rhett Lewis, thanks so much for being with us on the Next Pats podcast.
You're the best, DJ. I mean, Phil.
Oh.
Yeah.
It hurts. It hurts. All right, a lot of fun there to get a little Shrine Bowl flavor. We're talking Kyle Phillips. That's a name we've mentioned before on this podcast. The Lenore-Ryan connection. That's one we have to keep an eye on now. You got players from overseas. I mean, Rhett Lewis hitting us with all kinds of information there. Great stuff from him. Great stuff from Daniel Jeremiah. Thanks so much, guys, for tuning into our NFL Scouting Combine Primer podcast. Again, we're going to have much more content coming at you from Indy, so make sure you're following it all on NBC Sports Boston. I'm at Phil A. Perry on Twitter. All of our stuff will be there. Hopefully you can check it out. No doubt we will be talking to you very, very soon.